Hello, my name's Phil Galloway. I'm a freelance fine and digital artist from the northwest of England. Over the next couple of videos I'm going to be introducing you to ArtRage 5, the latest iteration of the ArtRage program. It's a very simple tool, but yet very intuitive and can create fantastic painterly effects. So whether you are experienced in digital art, a fine artist, a daytime doodler, or just want something to play about without getting paint all over the dogs, kids and walls, it's the tool for you. It's available on pretty much all platforms, from mobile phones right the way through to tablets and computers, and it's what I use for my daily work, day in, day out, and the effects it produces are fantastic. So what we're going to be looking at is taking a pencil sketch, bringing in a reference image, and then developing that pencil sketch, blocking in colour. We'll be looking at how we mix paint and how malleable and textural the paint can be in the program. We're going to be adding a little bit of texture and hopefully ending up with a nice, painterly, simple painting in the end. I hope you enjoy this. I hope you get a little bit out of it and it shows that digital art might be for you. I came from a fine art background and was introduced and thrown into the world of digital art very randomly and haven't looked back. So I try and juggle both sides of things as I can. But to be able to paint on the hop, sit on the couch and draw and paint without getting paint everywhere and getting in trouble at home, ArtRage is really, I think, the best for this. So I'm going to grab my tablet, I'm going to grab my stylus, and we're going to get to work. Okay, and welcome to ArtRage 5. Here we are, here's the interface and the desktop, really, I suppose. We're going to have a little tour around and show you what's what, where things are, how easy it is to select tools and colours, and then we're going to open up a new file and I'll bring in the reference that we're going to be using and hopefully show you a little bit of how to do that so it's nice and easy for you to set up your new file. Now ArtRage 5 is a little bit different depending on whether you're on Microsoft or iPads, but generally the process is the same, it's just the interface looks slightly different. So let's have a little tour around. So on the left hand side, on the bottom left, if you follow my cursor, you've got your tool picker. So you've got your oil brushes, your pencil, watercolor, paint roller, palette knife, all sorts of things for you to tinker about and have a play with. Within that, if we select the oil brush, then you can select settings. You can add paint texture, and you can see in the bottom left, the brush changes depending on how much paint I've got loaded on it. You can add thinner or pressure, and this changes for each one. So if you're on pencil, the interface changes, softness up, softness down. On the right hand side, we've got our color picker and the color wheel. So you just slide it along or tap in where you want and select the tone you need. If you want to decrease the size of that, you can collapse the area if your hand may be kind of going on top of it, and we'll bring that back up. And then finally, I suppose you will get onto references in a little second, but would be your presets. So if I selected the oil brush, ArtRage has very kindly put together a series of presets. So if you want dry clumpy brush, or you want varnished, they're all there ready to go. And if you switch to the pencil, then you get different pencil tools, all without having to go down the custom brush tool, which is this one, which is a little bit more advanced, I suppose, for the users. If you use the preset ones, it's very, very simple. So let's start by opening up a new file and what we're going to be working on. So we'll get rid of those. And in the top left corner, there's File. So you click it and then you select New Painting, and it will open up this box. Now initially it will say whether you want to choose your screen size in pixels, but this might be for most of you, but I come from a fine art background and I work on, whether I'm painting on A3, A2 or paper sizes. So if you click to print size, it will tell you how big the screen will be, your canvas will be. So if we select millimeters, and what we're going to go with we'll select 222, and we'll do a height of, say, 300. And on the right hand side, be sure to click into this box and make sure it's at 300. It usually is set at 72 by default. And if you save it at 72 pixels per inch, it will become, when you zoom in on it, it won't be very detailed. So be sure to whack it up to 300, which is the kind of industry standard for, exported JPEGs or images. Then all you've got to do, and we're not going to bother too much with selecting our canvas. We're going to just do it on a reasonably rough paper. I think for more advanced paintings, we might have a little look and more videos down that avenue and select a slightly rougher canvas. But for this one, I just want the paint to be sitting on the paper, nothing too textural. So we're going to click OK. ArtRage will then load up, and there you go. There's your paper ready to go. So the next thing we need is what we're drawing. So how we do this is if you select references, so refs on the right hand side, and then this little file box, and then load reference, and it will give you an option to look round your computer wherever you are. So we're going to be drawing this chap here. So you double click on it and in he comes. Move your paper, 2 fingers on your screen to resize and make smaller. And now we can use it in landscape or portrait. We'll get it set up and we're ready to start drawing. So we would select our pencil tool, select face shading or one of the harder pencils, and off we go. So in the next video, we're going to be sketching in the face and seeing how we go about doing that. Okay, so we've got ArtRage 5 open and we're starting to sketch out our pencil drawing. So, we've used our thumbnail sketch before, and unfortunately on the playback of the script, when you record the script as you're drawing, it doesn't actually show your reference picture, so you're going to have to imagine that I have got my bespectacled man on the left hand side as I'm drawing. And so what I've done is I've used some guidelines which I sketched out in the thumbnail sketch before, just to kind of show height on the page, where I'm up to, but also just to kind of get the form of the face right. And once I've got those guidelines in, I can start adding a little bit more detail and trying to pick out the features of the face. And as you can see, I mean, it's zooming along nice and fast, but hopefully it will give you an idea of how the pencil tools work on ArtRage and how you build up a picture. So I've just used the bog standard default pencil, which you open up. I've not tweaked anything on there, and I am, just sketching it in. I'm not looking for too much detail at this stage. I'm not looking for massive detail because it's going to be painted over. All I want to do is get a main body, something to work on, which has a reasonable likeness to the actual figure that we're going for. So I'm just building up the shirt here, keeping it nice and loose, gestural strokes again, because I want this painting to be quite, a bit of motion in there and a bit of movement. Excuse me. So, I'm quite happy with that, adding a little bit of shading just to kind of guide out certain areas, but really don't want to take too much time on this. Just make sure that the likeness is okay, I've got the features okay, and I know roughly with the guidelines of where I'm going to be painting light and dark. And that's just done with a little bit of line and a little bit of cross-hatching and a little bit of doodling, really. So there he is. We've got him all sorted. If we zoom in, there's not much detail there. It's not the best drawing on earth. It doesn't have to be. It just has to be a good starting point, because we're going to paint all over it with our nice thick paint in a little while after we've blocked in some colour. So let's move forward then and go on to blocking in some colour. Okay, so we've started blocking in some colour on this now. What we've done is, it's showing the photo on this one. I don't know why it wasn't on the last one. If I make that a little bit smaller. We've picked the oil brush tool from the left hand side. I've put the settings down to about 8% of paint on there. So basically what that means is there's less paint on the brush. It's as if you've just dabbed it in the paint a little bit, and as you pull your brush down across the canvas or the paper, it will run out. You will, it will give way, and it means that there's not too much loaded on the brush. If you were to load the brush up at this stage while you're blocking in, it would get muddy very quick. Basically all the paint would start molding together, blending, and you'd be left with a murky mess, which would be no good at all, especially when we're trying to pick out the highlights, lowlights, get the tones right, get the mid values right. So as you can see, I've put an orange background behind, which is a bit of a, as you'll probably know, if you come from a fine art background, a lot of the masters used to do it, and now it's continued through as quite a common practice. And basically, with the orange or warm tones behind, it just fills in the gaps. It makes the colours sing a little bit higher on top, and it just is a little bit easier than working just purely on a white background. And I find that most of my paintings, I'll put that behind the skin. So all I've done is I've picked out, using the little ink dropper in the toolbox, picked out a few of the highlight colours from the face and just start really kind of sketching it in. Now, because there's not much paint on the brush, it doesn't flow very much, so you're kind of using a lot of choppy strokes, which is absolutely perfect for what we're trying to achieve here. We're not going for a really photorealistic finish. We're going to go for a nice painterly painting that's going to hopefully have a lot of movement within it. So I'm sticking really to one layer at the moment. On the right hand side you'll see the layers box. Now you can add more layers, and that's more when you're adding more paint, because again you don't want it to become all blended too much. But on this particular stage of the painting, it can all be done on one layer because the paint just isn't moulding together. So I'm working through the hair now, trying to get that kind of the greens and the ochres coming through on his skin. But again, not being too worried about, detail and close-up detail. I'm just trying to pick out the highlights as we go. Introducing a little bit more warmer colours now, because I don't want him to look too kind of ashen and ghost-like. A few pinks. And usually what I'll do is, with my paintings, is keep the blocking in stage reasonably simple, but with a few kind of flashes of colour towards the end of it. It's more when you start loading the textural thick paint on that I introduce a bit more kind of, not wacky colours, but a little bit more crazy colours by then. But it's always nice to kind of just have a few of those shining through. So for highlights, I'll use quite a turquoisey blue, and for lowlights, you can start bringing in like a burgundies and warm reds. So we're just going to move on to a little bit of the shadows here. Hopefully add a bit of depth and definition, and with his glasses there. And keep, with two fingers, pinch and zoom on the screen like you would do on an iPad. You can zoom in, keep moving it, you can twist it, rotate it. I usually paint all my paintings in landscape mode, even though it is in a portrait picture, in portrait. And I've spoken to a few digital artists who do exactly the same, and maybe it's because there's somewhere to kind of rest your hand on the screen a little bit more as you're working. ArtRage has palm rejection, so you don't get little dots from your hand resting on the screen. Well, I found that when I turn the tablet round into landscape mode, into portrait mode, sorry, it just doesn't seem enough kind of screen real estate for me to work on. So I tend to do this. So it's up to you how you work it. So as you can see, I'm introducing a little bit of red into the shirt, a little bit more vibrant, and this will warm it up and give me a nice base to kind of build on once the thicker paint comes on. I'm keeping my brush strokes pretty thick, 92% there, going down to about 30 on smaller areas, and not too worried about the detail, as you can see. But it's starting to kind of come together now. I'm reasonably happy with it so far, and it's giving me a nice base to build on for when I start introducing a little bit thicker paint quite soon. So here's some last little highlights of turquoise blue, as I said, and I think we're all but ready for the next round. Okay, so we've got our blocking in, and now we're going to move on to adding a bit more textural paint and a little bit more thicker, and this is when the painting starts to come alive. On the blocking in stage, I'm never really happy with it. It always looks quite flat and dead. This is when it starts kind of creating the movement, getting a bit of life about it, a bit of luminosity. So what I've done is, on the left hand side, you can see I've selected the oil brush tool, and in the settings little box above it, if you click settings and then on loading, I've cranked that up to, you don't want to go too high at this stage, because again, if there's too much paint on it, it becomes muddied and blurred. So probably about 20, 25, probably tops on that, even down to as low as 19% would be absolutely fine. And what you'll find is, as you apply the paint, you can see there's a little bit more to it, a little bit more body on the paint, and you can see the brush strokes within it. So again, I'm just using the colour dropper colour picker tool and just picking out certain colours that I've already laid down in blocking and building on that and adding a little bit more warmer colour as we go. On the colour wheel, as you can see, the closer to the left of the middle bar, I suppose, the more vibrant and warm the colour. So I usually start with reasonably paler colours at this stage and then start building it up. You don't want to go too vibrant too quick, because then everything will start kind of blending off that colour and you'll be ending up with something that's probably a little bit too neon for my liking. So keeping it nice and loose. Again, I'm not going for photorealistic. I'm just going to go for a gestural painting. You know, laying it on as if I was kind of slapping paint onto a canvas on a wall, and then refining little bits as we go. I changed the thickness of the brush to suit, but usually at this stage I'm still keeping it quite chunky. So you can see I've got it at 36%, but then as I go into more detail, smaller areas, I'll drop it down to 20s and then whack it back up. So it's, you can constantly be thinking about your brush size, where you are on the screen, rotating it, using, you know, all your screen, zooming into certain areas. But again, at this stage I do quite like working from a distance on it, because when you get too tight into the painting, it will often, you'll get bogged down in detail and you'll lose that kind of the brush strokes. You'll start using little thin little lines, which again doesn't look like a realistic painting. You want to keep it chunky and thick, and that's the way I like to use digital art, really, as I would, you know, with a wide brush with, you know, acrylics or oils. So adding a little bit more warmth coming into it now. So I'm using the colour wheel a little bit closer to the left hand side, bringing in a little bit more warmer tones and trying to get that neckline built up. And it's funny using, you know, as with any kind of medium, but there's always stages where you're happier with. I mean, after the blocking in, I'm never too happy. Usually at this stage I'm not too happy. It's when we start adding the warmer, richer colours. So as you can see now, I've introduced a dark blue, which is about midway through the colour wheel, and you can see it's already added a richness to the painting, which wasn't there before. It was looking a bit dull, a little bit bleak and a bit dreary, and now we're starting to kind of get that realism, but that warmth to the painting. I found it quite hard at this stage, you know, to try and get that his kind of beard and neckline just right, because he's got all those kind of fine hairs, and I didn't really want to go into too much kind of you know, sketching out every hair. I've done paintings like that before, but this wasn't really for that. It's to show, excuse me, to show the texture of the paint that you can achieve on ArtRage, and going into those kind of fine minutiae of details just really wasn't what I wanted to do on this. But now you can see I'm starting to add a few more flourishes, a little bit more gestural strokes, and with the paint being loaded on, it's blending so nicely and reacts just like paint would on a canvas or on a palette. And this was when I started getting a little bit happier with it. It's starting to kind of come together. As soon as I introduced those flashy strokes onto the shirt, I was happy with it. Okay, so we're on the home straight here now. I'm still keeping with the kind of gestural strokes that seem to kind of bring the painting together. And obviously he's a modern chap. He's in front of a graffiti background, and I didn't want it to become a traditional boring painting. I wanted it to look loose and choppy, adding a little bit of flex of his beard there and on his eyebrows, and some texture and line. Now you could bring in the palette knife tool at this stage. You could start using the paint direct from the tube tool and build it up, but we just wanted to keep it nice and simple, an introduction just mainly to the oil paint brush for these lessons. So again, adding a little bit more highlights and colours and warmth to the shirt, but I like to reflect the colours that I use in one area in other areas, so you can see that I'll reflect those colours in the shirt, in his hairline, so it balances the painting out as we go. So what I've done now is I've gone to a layer behind. So you click on the right hand side onto the layers, and I'll pick a layer down below underneath, and using a much wider, drier brush, I'm just adding in a few flecks and gestural strokes just to add a little bit of interest. Now I've gone back, created a new layer on top of everything, and adding more paint, more highlights. And again, use as many layers as you want, really. If you don't, the paint will start to, again, get muddied if you use too much, in one layer, and it all starts kind of lumping on top of each other. So just click on the layers on the right hand side and click the plus box, and it will open up a new layer. You can rename it if you want, and you can carry on from there. So again, I've done a new layer for the glasses so it doesn't blend with any of the skin underneath. And now I'm starting to add a bit of depth to the glasses. Taking my time to try and get them reasonably detailed, but not so they're so precise that they stand out from the rest of the drawing. Trying to get the reflections, a little bit of highlights. And then we're going to move on to the background then. So it's the last little touches. And there we go. So he's all done and ready to go with the thick paint. And then it's just onto the background next. Okay, so we've got our pretty much finished painting here now. So all that's left to do is a few little touch-up areas, tidy up a few bits, and then add a background. And he's got quite a nice vibrant background on the picture, so we're hopefully going to emulate that. I'm not too worried about putting loads of detail in the background, just to kind of make him kind of lift off the page a little bit. I suppose if you're doing it backwards on a normal painting, you might, real life painting, you might put a little bit of the background in first, or sometimes, a lot of artists will kind of block it in after it. So let's set it playing and you'll see. So I touched up here a little bit of his lips and his glasses, and then what we wanted to do is add a little bit of texture. Now you can see that I'm adding brush strokes underneath the paint, and you can see it's adding texture, and this is by you create a new layer right at the bottom. You drag it right down. When you create a new layer, you drag it all the way to the bottom of the layers, and then you get a brush with a really heavily loaded brush with lots of paint on it. When you go underneath that, then you can start adding a little bit of texture to the areas that might look a little bit flat or dead, and it just makes the picture sing a little bit. So now I've created a new layer for the background, which is underneath everything, and I've tapped in the brush tool, and you can see I've whacked it all the way up to 400%, and I've set the paint loading to 3% on this, so it's a nice wide brush with hardly any paint on it. And so I'm just trying to get a feeling for something that might work in the background. I'm trying a few different things out, and I wasn't really happy with this first one. I thought that it looked, with the graffiti behind it in a painterly style, it looked a bit too busy. So what I've done is, rather than delete that layer, I've just hidden it, put a new layer on top of it, and we've gone again, trying to get a little bit more vibrancy now with the kind of bright turquoisey blue. Again, I've dropped the brush size down a little bit to 250%, so there's a little bit more movement, and I was much happier with this one. But what I decided to do, even though I was happy with this one, was to then make the last background that I did visible behind it. And as you'll see, it just adds a little bit of depth to the painting and kind of sets it off. Here we go, like that. So I was just umming and ahhing whether or not I liked that. I decided I did, and I'd go from there. Adding in a little bit more texture around the shirt, and again, taking elements from one area of the canvas and putting them in other areas so your eyes move across the canvas. And there he is, signed and complete. So I'm really happy with that. It's nice and modern, it's got a lot of movement, it's got a lot of brush strokes in there that will print up really, really nicely. So all that's left now is to export the file into whatever format you wish to use. So let's go and do that. Okay, so we've got our finished painting here, and I'm quite happy with it. It's nice and textural, and we've got the background sorted, which is nice and vibrant, and it's got good choppy movement. I'm quite happy with it. We've done some finishing touches, and now all that's left to do is to save the painting and to export it to whatever file we need. Now the nice thing with ArtRage 5 is, and most of the ArtRage actually, is that you can export it to various, file formats depending how you want to, go on from there. So whether it be you bring it into Photoshop if you want to do more work on it there, or it's involved in a bigger painting or a bigger picture, or however you want to do it, or a JPEG or a PNG file. So what you do, it's very, very simple. All you do is up in the top left, you select File, and then Export Image File. Click on that and it will give you a drop down. Now I've already saved it there, but it will give you a drop down box, and all you do is on the Save As type, you click in there, and depending on how you want to save it, so whether it's a JPEG or a Photoshop, so what we'll do is we'll save it as a JPEG, and we're going to call it Paint and Draw Finished. Okay, and then click Save. So again, if you wanted to save it as a Photoshop file, PNG, TIFF, a GIF or a GIF, however you do it, a JPEG or a BMP file, but we'll go for a JPEG on this one, and you click Save, and there it is, easy as that. It's done and ready for you to use however you see fit then. So I hope you've got a lot out of the video. ArtRage is a fantastic tool, as you can see. We've created a really nice, malleable, choppy painting. We're not too worried about too much detail. It's more to kind of show you the versatility of the program. And we've taken an image that's nice high resolution that we can use for various things going forward, or go straight to print with that high res JPEG, or indeed bring it into Photoshop and work with it more. So I hope you got a lot out of the video and learned a little bit about it, and hopefully I'll be doing a few more in the future. Alright, thanks a lot for watching, and bye for now.